Jonathan Amirault, 26 years old, was a boy like any other, a seemingly ordinary young man. He had a good job as an engineer and was well liked by his family and friends. He was kind, intelligent, and also very athletic. He had his whole life ahead of him. However, Jonathan's only mistake was having an affair with the wrong woman, a married woman. It is true that most of the time, infidelity does not end well, but in this case, things will take a tragic turn beyond what you can imagine. Britany and Armando Barron were married and both lived in New Hampshire. Britany was born on April 23, 1989. When she was 16, she started a relationship with Armando, who was 15 at that time. They had been married for several years and had 2 children, a girl and a boy. At first, their love story seemed promising, but unfortunately, it didn't last long. The couple's relationship deteriorated quickly as Armando became increasingly abusive towards his wife, both physically and verbally. Britany was the victim of this situation and she was becoming increasingly unhappy in her marriage, and as is sometimes the case, she sought comfort from another man. This was a man she regularly had contact with and worked with, a man named Jonathan Amirault. The two of them began an affair. Britany felt good with Jonathan. She felt desired, recognized, and respected. She was so comfortable in this secret relationship that she sometimes even thought of divorcing her husband to fully live her new life. However, Britany was very scared of leaving her husband. He was the father of her children, and they had been together for so long. Above all, she feared his reaction. However, in September 2020, she was leading a double life in between 2 relationships. As I said before, Britany and Jonathan met at their workplace. They both worked for a biomedical device company in Jaffrey. Jonathan was a little younger than her, having just graduated as a biomedical engineer, and this was his first job. He was very athletic and enjoyed hiking. They got along well from the start, and over time, their initially friendly relationship became more intimate. They would meet up whenever they could for moments alone, away from prying eyes. Britany knew her husband well and was right to be cautious because she knew if he found out about her infidelity, he would react in the worst way possible. On Monday, September 21, 2020, in New Hampshire, summer was coming to an end, but the weather remained mild. However, despite the blue sky and the good temperatures, Justine Amirault was worried. She had been waiting to hear from her son Jonathan for more than 48 hours. She contacted his workplace to ask about him, but unfortunately, he hadn't shown up to his work either. She had a bad feeling about this. It was not like her son to leave her without any news. So, she decided to inform the authorities about his disappearance. She told them that the last time she had heard from her son was Saturday, 2 days prior. She explained that he had not shown up for work that morning and had not called to inform anyone of any illness. After receiving this report, the police decided to go to Jonathan's home in the town of Keene. They found no trace of the young man or his gray Subaru Impreza on the premises. The officers then decided to inquire at his workplace, Teleflex, but they were informed that Thomas had not shown up to work that morning. However, there was a troubling coincidence. One of his colleagues, Britany Barron, had also skipped work that day. Unlike Jonathan, Britany had called to explain that she would not be coming in and even added that she might never return to work at Teleflex Medicals. At that point, no one was talking about a relationship between the two. However, various colleagues explained to the police that Jonathan and Britany got along well and were very close. There were some insinuations that Britany and Jonathan might be having a secret relationship, despite the fact that Britany was already married. The investigators then decided to go to Britany's house. When they arrived at the Barrons' home, his mother answered the door and explained that her daughter-in-law Britany and her son Armando had gone hiking and she was taking care of the children in their absence. She also indicated that the couple occupied the adjacent house. Police officers continued their investigation and obtained access to a group chat in a messaging app where one of Britany's friends had shared messages as evidence. In these messages, Britany mentioned that she probably won't be able to see her children for a while. She had decided to move to New Mexico, where her sister was living. Everything seemed planned. She would have a new job and could start a new life peacefully. She also mentioned in the messages that she was planning to distance herself from her husband. After that, the police decided to search the adjacent house and found a large amount of blood in the bathroom. Later that same evening, around 10:20 p.m., the investigators saw Armando's car parked in front of his house. In reality, the car belonged to his mother's boyfriend, but he used it daily. The police officers decided to go to Armando and ask if he knew where his wife was. He then explained that he had last seen his wife during the night of Saturday, September 19th to Sunday, September 20th, around 2 a.m. He added that he had dropped her off on the side of the road in the area of Temple Mountain, about 15 kilometers from their home. Armando revealed that the couple was not doing very well and that she had decided to take some time off and go camping with friends that night. He had felt that they had reached a point of no return and had been very moved to leave his wife there. He had driven for a long time afterward to accept the situation, not wanting the children to see him that way. He detailed his route precisely and explained that during this trip, he had spoken several times with Britany, who had later asked him to stop bothering her. At around 7 a.m. the next day, after Jonathan's disappearance, forest rangers discovered a wild camping site in the woods near Abbott Brook Road. They had been warned by hunters that there was a wild encampment where a bear had been sighted. As the two officers approached the wild camp, a dog began barking. A young woman, later identified as Britany Barron, immediately tried to calm the animal as if she didn't want to attract attention. The two men approached, and Britany emerged from a nearby trail. They immediately noticed that the young woman, who was wearing sunglasses, had a weapon concealed in her left bag. Also, something bulky was hidden under a large brown tarp to the left of the tent. Twigs, foliage, and branches had been used to camouflage the tarp as if it were meant to blend in with the surroundings. The two guards explained to Britany that she had to gather her things and leave because the area she was in was not an authorized camping zone. As they were leaving, she said, "I'm in big trouble." The police were not alarmed by these words, but Britany had forgotten her dog's transport cage at the scene. The guards turned around to retrieve it, and that's when they saw tracks in the mud that looked like something heavy had been dragged. Upon closer inspection, one of the officers was drawn to something else tied up in another tarp in the middle of a small stream. It was shaped like a body. Faced with these elements, the officers decided to arrest Britany and took her to the police station. Upon her arrest, one of the police officers removed Britany's glasses and noticed that she had 2 black eyes. In the meantime, the rangers had lifted the first tarp and discovered Jonathan's gray Subaru Impreza. At the back of the vehicle, more precisely in the rear trunk, they found a large quantity of blood as if a bloody object had been stored there. Upon lifting the second tarpaulin, the arriving police officers were horrified to discover a decapitated body. The medical examiner then identified various wounds, including a gaping wound on the left wrist. They also found a firearm, an axe, a saw, a machete, and a small knife, all stained with blood, in Britany's bag. Once at the police station, Britany was questioned, and this is what she told them. At 11:13 a.m. on Saturday, September 19th, while she was taking a shower, her husband, who sensed that his wife had been acting strange lately, went through her phone and found messages exchanged between Britany and Jonathan. Furious, Armando attacked his wife, repeatedly hitting and insulting her. He specifically targeted her face, resulting in black eyes and a heavy nosebleed. Despite her injuries, Armando showed no mercy and dragged her into their bedroom, where he threw her onto their bed and continued his violent assault. The horror escalated to its pinnacle when Armando pulled out a firearm and forced it into Britany's mouth, pretending to shoot. Britany later recounted that she believed her last hour had come at that moment. After playing this deadly game, Armando attempted to strangle her by forcefully squeezing her throat, leaving her gasping for air and feeling like she was slipping away from this world once again. She eventually lost consciousness, but before that, she had time to catch a glimpse of her 9-year-old daughter, who had apparently witnessed this terrible scene. In this chaos, Armando decided to set a trap for Jonathan. He contacted him via message through his wife's phone, pretending to be her, and arranged to meet him in a very secluded park. In the meantime, Britany regained consciousness, and her husband told her that he had arranged a meeting with Jonathan and forced her to accompany him in the car. As they headed to the meeting place, he hit his wife in the face again, causing her nose to bleed heavily. When they arrived, Jonathan was there, eager to meet Britany, unaware of the monstrous trap he had fallen into. Armando surprised him by attacking him violently. Jonathan was overwhelmed and couldn't do anything. The enraged husband then took a gun and forced it into the hands of the terrified Britany. He demanded that she prove her remorse by shooting her lover. Despite repeated orders to pull the trigger, Britany was too terrified to comply. She couldn't bring herself to shoot. Then he forced her to place her foot on Jonathan's throat in order to kill him. But she wasn't applying enough pressure. She couldn't kill him. Annoyed by his wife's behavior, he forced the poor man to get in the back of his car. Then he forced Britany to cut his wrists with a small sharp blade. Trembling and praying, she obeyed her husband's demand to cut Jonathan's wrists, but she didn't cut them deep enough as Armando wanted. Afterward, he ordered Jonathan to enter the vehicle, with Britany positioned in the driver's seat and Armando in the passenger seat. They were about to leave when suddenly Armando turned around and shot Jonathan 3 times, twice in the chest and once in the head. After this carnage, the couple returned home. Armando ordered his wife to gather the necessary camping gear and then forced her to take Jonathan's car with his lifeless body inside. He told her that they were going to go to a small town located 300 kilometers away, and he took the wheel of their family car, following behind her. However, prior to their departure, he disclosed to her that he would forgive her of her infidelity once the sun had risen. Before arriving at their destination, they stopped at a store to buy 2 tarps, an accelerant, a can of foaming detergent, and a shovel. They then headed into the woods where they set up their camp for the night. But the nightmare for Britany was not over yet. Armando asked her to decapitate Jonathan, who had succumbed to his wounds. He explained to her that without the head, it would be impossible for the authorities to identify the body. Britany, terrified and fearing for her life, complied. Armando dug a hole to put the head in, and he ordered his wife to dispose of the body by wrapping it in a tarp and digging a hole a little further away. On Monday morning, Armando went to the Keene area because he had no network in the forest. He had taken Jonathan's phone because he planned to send messages to justify his absence. However, before doing so, he called his mother, who informed him that Jonathan's mother had reported him missing. Additionally, she also mentioned that the police were also searching for Britany. So he quickly returned to the camp and warned Britany that Jonathan had been reported missing, as well as herself. Next, he destroyed Jonathan's phone by smashing it into pieces and scattering them in different locations. He then compelled Britany to accompany him while sending messages to her friends, justifying her absence. These are the messages I mentioned earlier. He then brought her back to the camp and ordered her to dispose of the body. He told her that he would come back in 4 days to pick her up and that she had better have finished before he left. He confided her with the murder weapon so that she could defend herself against wild animals. Britany had just told them everything that had happened, but even after all these revelations, she continued to cooperate and led the police to find the pieces of the phone. The officers in charge of her interrogation could see that the young woman was suffering from various injuries, particularly striking around her eyes, which were both black and blue. They believed she had cooperated enough for the moment and took her to the hospital, where she could receive treatment. The conclusions of the examination of her injuries seemed to correspond with her version of events. That same evening, the police tried to lure Armando in by contacting him by phone and asking him to come to the station in connection with the disappearance of his wife. However, he refused, claiming that his wife had not disappeared. She had gone camping, as he had explained the day before. But the police insisted that it was their duty to ensure the physical integrity of Britany, as she was considered missing. Armando was arrested that day, and upon his arrival at the police station, his rights were read to him. He asserted his right to be assisted by a lawyer. Scratches were discovered on his right wrist, along with dried blood on his forearm and left calf. The couple's daughter was also interviewed by an investigator in the presence of her father. When questioned about the events of September 19th, she stated that although she had heard screaming, she assumed it was her parents arguing and did not witness anything firsthand. She clarified that she was at her grandmother's house at the time, having been taken there as soon as the screaming started. Following Britany's instructions, the police were able to locate Jonathan's head. Doctors had authorized her to assist them in their investigation, and she led them to the location where Jonathan was attacked by Armando. The authorities brought Armando Barron to trial for the premeditated murder of Jonathan Amaral based on the evidence collected during the investigation. Meanwhile, Britany faced charges of falsifying and destroying evidence. She pleaded guilty and agreed to cooperate with the state throughout the trial. As per the agreement with the prosecutor, Britany also pledged to cover the funeral expenses of Jonathan and any psychological aid that the Amaral family might require after the incident. Her lawyer requested that she be released on bail, but the request was denied by the judge, who believed that she had not made any effort to save her lover's life when opportunities had presented themselves. The judge deemed her too dangerous to be released. Armando's trial began on May 2022. Armando was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He was found guilty on all charges, including first-degree murder and those domestic violence and assault charges. In these kinds of cases, often the husband kills the unfaithful wife or the lover, but in this case, Armando wanted to force his wife to kill her lover in an extremely cruel manner. I believe that in a fit of rage, he wanted to hurt her and make her suffer. He first attacked her violently, leaving visible marks on her face, but I think he also wanted to traumatize her psychologically by forcing her to kill her lover. I cannot imagine the terror that Britany must have felt when he tried to force her to pull the trigger. He then took care of the execution, but he wanted at all costs to involve her in the process. Thus, he forced her to decapitate the body. Honestly, it's horrifying. On the other hand, some people questioned Britany and found her guilty of not calling the police. However, I think she must have been in shock and very scared. She must have been afraid for her life and that of her children too. Finally, my thoughts go to Jonathan's family, who lost their beloved son in a cruel way. I hope they will be able to move on. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to follow for more crime stories.